Hello everyone. Today's video we're going to be taking a look at the basics of using missions as well as kind of how to approach scenarios in command modern operations. So the scenario we have here today is we're going to be doing this from the map editor so I can kind of play a little bit here just to give you some cool ideas. Basically we have ourselves here in lovely Vietnam. This is before Vietnam got split a few years later. This is March 15th of 1954 and it's about 5 o'clock in the morning, so it's pretty early on. As you probably know from history, we have the Battle of Dien Bien Phu, which is already underway, which is way, way, way over here, pretty much on the Laos border. We have the good armies of General Giap basically surrounding this entire environment, where France is basically doing the best they can with an air bridge to supply them. Meanwhile, we have some support in Hanoi. We also have this neat little carrier battle group sitting over here, and we have a port in the event that something gets damaged. So when I first start any scenario in command, when I'm actually going to go play it, the first thing I like to always do is go up to game, and there's this really neat button that says Browse Scenario Platforms. Knowing about your opponent is like 75% of any battle. So just quickly going over to Viet Minh here, go down to facility. Looks like we have some recon infantry, some artillery batteries, some mortars. Looks like we have some sappers. Again, we're borrowing this from 10 years too late, but that's okay. Looks like we have some AAA. So let's go ahead and take a look at one of these units. Let's see here. What do we have for range? It's got about 600 rounds of ammunition because there's 6 guns and there's 100 each. That's problematic. Let's see here. It's got some binoculars. It's going to make its life a little bit simpler. Okay, it's about a 4 nautical mile range. Interesting. That's going to come in handy a little later on. Let's go scoot over to the mortar battery. Chances are a mortar platoon is not going to have the same range as that. Looks like a 3 nautical mile range. Let's go scoot over to, let's see what the support platoon has. Let's see, anything fancy? It looks like they have 282mm mortars, 3 nautical miles. Interesting. And of course, let's take a look at this AAA sight as well. So this AAA sight would be based on pretty much a really, really early, lightweight 37mm sight. One thing it would have that it wouldn't have is this OECM. It would just pretty much be whatever. Let's take a look here. Range. We're very interested in range. 37mm, 1.5 nautical miles, 5. How about altitude? Altitude's very important, as you'll see. Let's see here. Maximum altitude doesn't actually give that to me on that particular page. Let me scoot back real quick. So we'd assume that it's 1.5 nautical miles. 1.5 times is about 2,000. So that's about okay. So about 10,000 feet is going to be the limit there, which that's enough. It's definitely enough. Okay. So why do we care about the units in the particular scenario? Well, I'll show you. The whole goal of the scenario, of course, is to provide air support to our poor besieged troops over here in Dien Bien Phu. We know that the longest range of any enemy artillery is 4 nautical miles. We can use that information to actually determine where your enemy could possibly be placing units before we've even started the battle. This is just using some military intelligence here. Yeah, I know it's an oxymoron. So we'll go ahead and create ourselves. I'm pressing Control D, by the way, to give us this neat little tool here. And basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a little box. Press Control Insert, click. Go ahead and scoot all the way to here. So that would be 4 there. We need to go out to 8 nautical miles. Is going to be over in this corner. I'm going to go Control Insert to place. These are called reference points. These are very, very useful as far as setting up kind of a general zone of everything. So go 4 nautical miles in this direction, and we'll pretty much eyeball it. Now, these reference points can be used for a lot of different things. You can also rename these reference points. I can actually click one, press Control R, and you could say, for example, northwest corner. You do something like that if you prefer. Again, do whatever makes sense for you when you're doing it. If you need to delete a reference point, you can press Control Delete. You can also go up here and hit this. So why did I create these little reference points? My reasoning is simple. There's no way the enemy can land artillery on us beyond this area, which means if I'm going to be flying in air support and stuff, keep in mind I'm not doing interdiction here. This is all just going to be close air support. I just need to operate in this area. Anything beyond that is nice to hit, but it's not necessarily going to be an immediate threat to me. And that's going to come important later. So that's kind of how I start things in the beginning. I also like to check my weather. It's 5 o'clock in the morning, which is a little too early for operations in the air. Keep in mind, nobody's got night vision goggles really in 1954. We know that there's some moderate middle clouds between 7 and 16,000 feet, which means if I need to escape, that's going to be an excellent altitude. That also means that if I order my guys to fly underneath that cloud layer, we're going to be right in the lethal range of those enemy artillery pieces, or AAA, I should say. So kind of keep that in the back of your head. So now that that's all set, I always like to kind of survey what I have at my disposal. A couple different ways you can do this. You can go to game, you could scoot over to order battle. This works really, really well. Basically, it's going to open up a little menu, and you can see everything I have, all the different troops. You have Dien Bien Phu, it's got all these items down here. You can close this menu. I've got my French carrier battle group, which I've got all sorts of different aircraft. I have one nice aircraft carrier. We also have Hanoi Air Base, which has got all sorts of crazy stuff on it. And that's kind of pretty much it as far as the initial setup goes. And again, this is a scenario I created, so I have a fairly good idea of where everything is, but I do randomize things. So anyway, we know that at about 9:30 in the morning, there's going to be a very, very large attack. That gives us a total of about, let's see here, 4.5 hours to do anything we can in order to protect this particular area. Keep in mind that there's no close air support aircraft at Dien Bien Phu. It's only going to be basically support aircraft, like aircraft and things like DC-3s, C-54s, things like that. So that means any air support I need needs to travel this entire distance to get here. So if I quickly just measure that, it's 155 miles from Hanoi, and it's about 215 nautical miles away from our little carrier battle group here. That means my travel time is really critical. If I have an aircraft that only travels 240 knots, for example, it's going to take almost an hour to cover that distance, which means if the shooting's going to start, again, this is just intelligence, this tells us, it's not going to do very good for us. So you have to keep travel time in mind. Plus, remember, it takes time to get the airplanes in the air, so it's going to take even longer. Anyway, let's see what we got. So for our carrier battle group, keep in mind, 215 nautical miles. We have a pretty good collection of aircraft, a couple different types of Corsairs, some Bearcats, and Helldivers. Now, usually when scenario designers set things up, they will set limited ammunition on a carrier. So I can't just grab an airplane and load anything I want with it. They also like to set some of the aircraft as in maintenance. You can't actually use an aircraft in maintenance unless you're in the scenario editor. This is basically the scenario designer's way of saying you just can't use these planes, but they're free targets for the bad guys. Again, design it as you want. So I'm going to go ahead and grab my Corsairs. Let's go ahead and ready arm. And we have a couple different choices. We have some 250 kilogram bombs with some Zunis. These are gigantic. These are 5-inch rockets. We have kind of a mix of bombs, and we have a mix of heavy bombs plus rockets. Before we get carried away, you want to scoot all the way over here to check what my strike radius is going to be. You can say very, very clearly that it's a 240 nautical mile strike radius, which is actually good, because if you remember, it's only 216 miles away. Granted, they're going to get there, drop their stuff, and get out fast, because there's not going to have any. So, what ordnance do we carry? Now, this is where you're going to have to use a little bit of cleverness. And you can also, if you go to the view mode, you can actually tell it to show you what the land cover is. Now, the land cover here tells us what is actually on the ground as far as cover goes. You can actually bring up a little menu here that will actually show you what the individual places are called, what all the different layers are called, and things along those lines. Let's see, where is that terrain type legend? There it is. So we can see here that in Hanoi, naturally, it's pretty urbanized. But way, way out here in Dien Bien Phu, you can see while there is some urban area, all the troublemakers are going to be over here. You can actually hold your mouse over it, and it says that they're going to be evergreen broadleaf forest. That means that weapons that tend to just go boom, or small booms, I should say, I should be more specific, aren't going to do any damage whatsoever. So cluster bombs are out, little stuff is out. Ideally, you want to be using things like napalm and very, very large caliber anything in order to do any damage. Unfortunately, the poor French forces here, they're not nearly as well protected. So anyway, that's kind of an interesting thing you want to kind of keep in the back of your head. By the way, you can disable that feature. If you go to scenario settings, you can actually disable effects of terrain type. That also affects mobility, by the way, so kind of keep that in mind as well. Anyway, let's go back to what we were doing. So with that in mind, let's go back to our Corsairs. And what do we need to arm them with? Guns are kind of nice, but the problem with guns is they don't like going through trees. The rockets are nice, especially these 5-inch rockets. These things are gigantic. So they're actually pretty effective, and they're actually pretty accurate. Another thing you can do is you can actually click on the rocket itself. Man, that thing's huge. And it will actually tell you what its reliability as well as accuracy is. And this particular thing, a 20 millimeter, that'd be amazing. 20 meter CEP makes this a very accurate rocket. Compare that with our little bomb buddy here. Let's take a look. Now we see that we have a 50 meter, so this is less accurate, but it's got a bigger bang. The other thing you want to pay attention to is what altitude can I launch these things at? 1,000 feet above ground level is actually not that high, and if we're dealing with AAA, 1,000 feet is pretty dangerous, so we got to keep that in mind. So what do you pick? Personally, I'm going to go with this option because I know that gives us a really big bang, plus it has an accurate component. So I'm going to click OK Ready. If you're not in the scenario editor, you won't get these cool buttons. You also have this option here to click here. If you push that button, that's going to ready the aircraft minus any external fuel tanks or air-to-air missiles like a Sidewinder or something. So I'm going to order them to get ready. Notice it's going to take them 3 hours before I can use them. That's going to be problematic. Let's grab our other group of Corsairs as well. So this one has a very similar setup. I'm going to get something with a big bang. It's nice and accurate. Let's go to the Bearcats. Now the Bearcats are going to be problematic. Let's take a look. Oh, napalm. Excellent. This stuff is great. Unfortunately, you can see our strike radius is 150 nautical miles, which means we can never get to Dien Bien Phu from where we are. So we are stuck leaving it with internal guns, which means we can use these actually as interceptors if we needed to. But at this point in the war, the Vietnamese don't have airplanes of their own. The regular Bearcats, it's going to be the exact same problem. Yeah, you can see it's just too short of a range, which is really a bummer. The Helldivers are really, really good planes. These are dedicated attack aircraft. So when it goes to ready arm, let's see if there's anything useful here. Nice. Oh, hello, 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 napalm. M47, I like that. So I'm going to go ahead and ready these guys. They're not going to be ready for 6 hours, though. So hopefully the war isn't over by the time these guys are ready to go. Let's scoot up here to Hanoi Air Base. Thunderjets. These are definitely early kind of first generation, second generation jets, but they can carry a spectacular amount of stuff. Notice their mission profiles here. You got up to 400 nautical miles, so anything here is good. Sometimes when you're picking these different kinds of loadouts, you're going to see things as long range. That simply says carry less stuff to exchange it for longer range. For every reason, though, you'll actually notice that the range for the strike radius is not changed. That's just kind of interesting. So a couple different choices here once again. What do I get for tooth? Oh, that's sweet. So what's the difference? Okay, so if I pick this guy, what do I get? I get an optional, I get a little bit more probably range because I've got these extra fuel tanks. So there's really no reason in the world not to pick this one unless it takes longer to prepare. Surge time, ready time, 4 hours. Yeah, that's good. I'm going to go for the long range option. Keep in mind, sometimes the long range option removes bombs. Like, yeah, that's a good example right there. But I'm going to go ahead and, that's pretty impressive. That's really cool. All right, let's see what we got for the meteors. Let's see here. The meteor, these work pretty well. Oh, busted. Let's go check that one more time. 120 nautical miles. How do we got to go? It's 160. It happens. So these meteors, unfortunately, are left with just their guns. That must mean these meteors are also going to have the same problem. The Mystery. Let's go ready arm real quick. What do we get? First of all, take a look at your range. This is pretty tight. That's really, really early. Let's see, we got these guys. 105 millimeters or 4-inch rockets. We got some bombs. Oh, what do we do? What do we do? What do we do? Let's go with rockets this time. I want something a little bit more precise. Go ahead and ready them up. They'll be ready in about 6 hours. We have some Thunderbolts. Our World War II fans probably know all about Thunderbolts. Let's see what we have here. We could go with rockets again. I kind of like the idea of a mixed loadout, like with rockets and a couple bombs. That's going to make it a little bit more flexible. What's the ready time on that? 6 hours. Can I have anything that's less? Oh, here we go. So this one's only 3 hours. Yes, I'll take that. I like that. Okay. The Uruguayan. Let's go down to Blue Hawk here. Let's go ahead and... nice. I'll take that. Keep in mind, if you're in the middle of the desert, you can get a little less serious. Ooh, an A-26. These things are going to be great, but they're going to take forever to get ready. And we have some incendiary bombs. Looks good to me. 600 nautical mile strike radius. Looks good to me. All right, we have C-47s. We have 2 different kinds. If we were doing cargo operations, we could have a lot of fun. The reason I put these in the map is to simulate the resupply of this particular airbase over here, of Dien Bien Phu. And we'll actually set up a mission for that first. And last but not least, we're going to scoot over here into Dien Bien Phu, and you can see we have some C-47s and C-54s desperately loading up the wounded from the battle. We also have these RT-33As, which weren't actually present. They actually use these basically Piper Cubs at Dien Bien Phu as a way to spot the Viet Minh artillery. But I just put these in here to make things kind of interesting. We're going to put these guys to work immediately. Then, of course, we have some RB-26s, but they won't be around for another 3 hours. This is just a really, really nice camera version of the regular B-26. Okay. So let's go ahead and do some damage here. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set up a mission to simulate the cargo transport between Hanoi and Dien Bien Phu. Plus, it makes it fun for the Viet Minh. They get something to shoot at. So I'm going to press Control F11 if you want to create a mission directly, or you can just press the F11 key, or if you prefer, you can go up and actually just click the mission editor right up here. We can do mission editor and we're good to go. So I'm going to go ahead and click on Create New Mission. I'm going to call it Ferry. I'm going to call it Ferry. Let's make sure it's all set. Don't need any of that. Go ahead and activate that. Press OK. You can also set activation and deactivation time should you need. Check that real quick. Check that. Make sure it's all on. You only need a single aircraft. That works for me. Ferry mission. So it's going to be going to Dien Bien Phu, a airbase one way. Now, to simulate the aircraft actually going back and forth, I'm going to set it to cycle. So it's actually going to go like this. So it's kind of neat if you ask me. Again, we don't normally need to do this in a game, but some missions will actually have you rebase cargo, and this is just kind of a neat way to do it. So anyway, let's go ahead and get those aircraft from Hanoi. Pretty good number of them right here. Let's go ahead and grab those C-47s also. There we go. Oh, I hate it when I do that. Be careful when you name things. And let's grab that one. Put those guys there. Okay, so these aircraft now are going to take off, fly to Dien Bien Phu, quote, pick up casualties, quote, then they're going to fly back, kind of doing one of these. So this is not a very specific name for this mission, so I'm going to be a little bit more specific. There we go. Yeah, that's better. Let's go ahead and create a new mission now. Let's call this one Ferry DBP to Hanoi. I always like doing the little arrow to kind of give me a heads up that this is the intention. This is the direction we're traveling in. So that looks good to me. Looks good. We're going to set this to cycle also. We'll set this to single aircraft. Double check to see which its destination is. By the way, when you ferry, it changes the home base, which could affect you. So let's go grab the other C-54s, and let's go ahead and grab those C-47s. Okay, so this means throughout the entire mission, aircraft are going to be taken up and landing, basically simulating that air bridge that we saw. Meanwhile, we need to put those T-33s to use immediately. So we're going to get them doing some kind of little, basically an aerial patrol here. So I notice that my altitude is about 2,500 feet, and my cloud cover is about 7,000 feet. But if you remember, those anti-aircraft guns are effective up to 1.5 nautical miles. It's going to be about 5,000. It's going to be a little just shy of 10,000 feet, let's say. So in order for us to take reconnaissance, we have to stay under the clouds or we won't be able to see anything on the ground. Obviously, the lower we fly to the ground, the easier it is to see stuff on the ground and easier to get shot down. So I'm going to kind of split the difference and go for 6,500 feet. So let's set up that reconnaissance mission. I'm going to press Control F1. I'm going to call it Recon DBP. I'm going to set it to patrol, and I'm going to set it to anti-surface patrol ground. Now, there's a bunch of different ways to do this. This method works well for what I'm doing. I'm going to press OK. Now, you notice it just gave me that angry message, and you're probably sitting there going, what was that all about? Well, it turns out that when you create missions, you have to make sure that the area that you're drawing draws a normal shape. In this case, it was reselected, so now we're good to go. So let's go ahead and get our T-33s up in the air as fast as possible. Looking good. I'm going to do that by single aircraft. I'd rather only one get shot down when bad news happens. I'm going to set it. Yeah, that looks pretty good to me. This simply says keep 1/3 in the air at all times. This one says check out anybody beyond the patrol area. This one check out anybody who's within weapons range. These, by the way, can be made exclusive. You can also tell him to turn his radar on when he's inside of this area. And of course, you can set him on a repeatable loop, so you can get really, really, really fancy with this. Obviously, there's not going to be any refueling, enforced size. That's good. Okay, this is the important part right down here. What we want to do is we want to set his station throttle to cruise. Well, this is tricky. I'm going to leave it on loiter. That's going to be quick enough. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do station altitude. This is how high off the ground he's going to be at the station. And if you remember, I said I want to go a little less than 7,000 feet. The other thing you can do too is you could set this to 2,000 feet. and then tell it to be terrain following. Either one of those techniques works really, really well here. I'm just clicking this to make sure it's set. So now the aircraft are going to take off. 1/3 of the aircraft, by the way, that means 4. They're going to take off, and they're randomly going to zigzag in here, cruising at an altitude of 6,500 feet, trying to look for the Viet Minh. So now we're pretty much ready to go and unpause things, so to speak. Now, if I were a more clever player, which unfortunately I'm not, I would take those Bearcats and actually launch them immediately so that they have the ability to go ahead and rebase here at Dien Bien Phu. The problem is the Viet Minh artillery is going to be opening up at 9:30, which is going to ruin that airbase. So it's going to be a waste of airplane. So anyway, we're good to go. So my next big step is going to be waiting for those individual aircraft to be ready to be used so I can deploy them. But my hope is between now and then that we're able to actually see some of those ground targets. I'm actually going to go get smart here and add the RB-26s as well once they're ready. And that's going to be not until about 9, 10 o'clock, and by then the fireworks will have started. So let's go ahead and unpause. Speaking of pausing and unpausing, for those of you who are relatively new to all this, one of the things you want to notice is the difference between the rate of speed as well as these cool little buttons down here. So what these buttons do is they allow you to only allow a certain amount of time to elapse. So let me pause for a second. Let me go ahead and crank it up to maximum speed. If I were just hit play, it's just going to rip along. Now I hit pause. Now let's say I only wanted that to go for a single minute. So what you can do is you can click 1 minute down here, and now notice only 1 minute at a time passes. So it's an amazing way to have a little bit more control over the action. So for example, I could come down here and I could say skip 15 seconds. And the good news is my T-33s have done a wonderful job, and they've actually already identified several different units kind of spread out. In the real world, you're not going to see these things, especially at what time is it? 5:07 in the morning. It's not even daylight yet. But the good news is that means I can employ some of my aircraft to do some close air support immediately. So I'm going to go ahead and skip ahead 5 minutes. Nice. So I'm going to go into game. I'm going to go over here to MCON, WRA in general, and I'm going to allow the artillery at our base to open fire. Slow down time a little bit. So what's going to happen next is you're going to hear all sorts of explosions as all the main guns try to open up on all these different batteries that are up here. Keep in mind, these targets, if you take a look at the little time underneath them, this is the last time we saw that target. Most of these targets are very, what they call ambiguous. We're not sure where they are. This big red circle, by the way, is basically dictating all its possible locations depending on what's going on. It's not stopping the artillery crews and the mortar crews from doing the best they can to start the fireworks, so to speak. A lot of times this is a waste of ammo, by the way, because you're just going to end up hitting nothing. Now, something else I want to point out real quickly is it's still nighttime. So that is going to drastically affect our ability to spot and attack units. Keep in mind that in the real world, you'd basically be shooting at muzzle flashes. So it's very interesting like this. Now, one thing I'm not a fan of is we're going to cook through our ammunition fast. Not as fast as the Viet Minh are if we don't get our air support to help us out here. But again, that could cause a lot of problems. I'm going to go ahead and let a minute go ahead and skip by here. So after another minute of shelling, I'm down almost a quarter of my shells. So I'll let another minute pass by real quick. You can see they've automatically changed targets and they've started to engage people there. We'll let 5 minutes go by. And notice everybody stopped firing. Let's go ahead and pause. Excellent. Why do we stop firing? Well, the reason is most of my guys are probably out of... Man, no, I've got some ammunition left. The target probably now is so vague, they don't even know where to put the first shell. So we're going to have to hope that a little later on in the day that these aircraft are able to reacquire that particular target they saw earlier. So at 5 minutes zip. Oh, seems like they found another one. These guys are obviously not friendly. These guys are definitely not friendly. Okay, so we're doing a decent job here. We're doing it. Oh, stop. Just kind of highlighting these guys and hitting the H key. Clearly, they're not French. So right now it's about 5:37. It is perfectly dawn. It is time to start thinking about the rest of our air support. So if I were to go over here and just... Oh, by the way, these are all the aircraft that we launched. Remember, these are the C-54s. They're all coming in to reinforce us. Anyway, so we'll go over to our carrier battle group, and we'll just take a look. They're about 2 hours and 22 minutes away. These are the ones I really want to use, but they're about 3 hours away. So what do we do? Well, if you remember, these guys are about 200 and I think it's 20 nautical miles away. That's in range, and those Bearcats will get there in about an hour, because remember, they're only traveling about 210. If we wanted to check that out, by the way, you could always go up here to the database. Let's see what we got here. Oh, isn't it so nice? Let's scoot real quickly. What do we have for a cruise speed? Cruise speed. Here we go. Cruise speed, 320. Okay, so 320 is not too bad. 320 divided by 220. Oh, I'm sorry, 220 divided by 320. That's going to get there in 41 minutes. So 41 minutes is actually pretty good. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to call those Bearcats up and ask them to do some close air support. So to do that, I'm just going to bring up my editor real quick. I'm going to go ahead and create a new mission. I'm going to say Bearcat CAS. I'm going to do, let's do a patrol, and let's go ahead and do an anti-surface ground patrol. Press OK. Yeah, I remember. All fixed. So how does this work? It's pretty straightforward. Let me go ahead and make the screen a little bigger for you. I'm going to grab those Bearcats. That remember, they're only armed with those cannons, but they're ready to launch immediately, so might as well use them, right? I'm actually going to pause my game real quick. Let's grab both groups. Now, here's an important thing. Do we launch all of them at the same time? Or do we just kind of hang out and just sort of launch little bits of them at the same time? It's not worth it. You want to launch everybody at once when you're doing this kind of operation. It's going to make it more difficult for them to be engaged, and it's also going to be, from a morale perspective, terrifying when 24 airplanes suddenly show up and start strafing the bejesus out of everything. So I'm going to go ahead and disable the 1/3 rule. That means everybody's going to launch. I'm going to let them investigate other contacts if they do any interdiction. And now we need to decide on our flight size. So we have a total of 24 aircraft here. So how many aircraft do you put together in a group? Now, typically when you're doing attack aircraft, it's going to be 4 aircraft per group. You could also do it as pairs. Again, you want to decide exactly what you're trying to do here. In this case, I'm going to go for 4 aircraft because it's a pretty typical size. So now I'm going to go ahead and pause. Let's go ahead and fast forward 5 minutes. Speed up time. Now, if I scoot all the way over to the carrier, these Bearcats have just taken to the sky. They will be arriving in about 42 minutes, which is going to be, let's see, it's about 6:30 or so, which is pretty cool. But the nice thing is, by 6:30, it should be bright enough for them to actually start strafing targets on the ground. So I'm going to go ahead and unpause. Go ahead and see how things are going right over here. Looks like the French are using their artillery very aggressively. Keep in mind, the Viet Minh are going to return fire at about 9:30. So anything we don't get now is going to be really, really bad. And it seems like they're doing a pretty good job defending themselves so far. Again, the ground combat model is not nearly as sophisticated as games like Armored Brigade or anything along those lines. So keeping an eye on the clock here, it's 6:30, 6:27, and guess who just got here? Ha ha! So one of the things that's really critical is understanding logistics. If you run out of ammunition, run out of fuel, you can't actually win the fight. Fortunately for us, we don't have to worry about feeding anybody or DPing them or something along those lines. So the Bearcats are here. So the Bearcats are now going to lose a bunch of altitude, and they're going to try to zing in here and do some strafing. By the way, in order to make units actually strafe, you have to enable it with this command right here. Keep in mind, none of these Bearcats are equipped with bombs. They're going to have to use these 20mm cannons and do what they can with what they have. But it's 6:30 now, so now it's daytime, so they're going to be a little bit more successful. And you can see there's a whole bunch more that have just been launched from the carrier. Now, if you look at these guys, they still have a pretty substantial amount of fuel remaining, about 326 kilograms to go before they're bingo. That's 45 minutes of loiter time, which is incredible. Once you get to modern aircraft and modern times, that becomes a little bit more difficult. By the way, if you want to make this red zone go away, you can just go up here and actually shut it off. And now it's gone. All right, time to watch some fireworks. All right, speed up time a little bit. We'll go ahead and do 5 minutes of air-to-ground attacks here. Oop, I guess I didn't push the button all the way. Yeah, it's fine, whatever. So they're going to go ripping in. They're going to try to spot their targets, and they've immediately started strafing whatever this target over here is. You can see they're spiraling around. You can actually have a little bit of fun with this because you can go to view mode, you can go to 3D, assuming you have TAC view. I know a lot of people demand Fog of War with TAC view, but honestly, I just use it because it looks cool. I know that sounds kind of lame, but that's kind of how I feel it. So we can see, actually, you can see the substantial amount of infantry. It looks like we got most of our artillery, though, so this has actually gone pretty well for us so far. This is not how the real battle of Dien Bien Phu went. By the way, there goes one of our aircraft arriving at station. Oh, we just spotted something else. We're just going to assume that's hostile. Keep in mind, identification is one of the biggest challenges of modern combat. So these guys are just kind of do the little spiral thing. They're like angry insects. The problem is they're going to have a really tough time killing this infantry because of the grass. Notice, this guy ran out of everything. Yeah, they're completely empty, so they turn around and fly home. Meanwhile, this next group is Bearcats, because remember we called them up in a huge, big posse, are coming in now. Now, here's the problem. Had we not told them to attack on one giant pile, when these Bearcats started to turn around and return to base, the new ones would be taking off. Remember, that's a 40-minute flight. So that would have been pretty bad for us. But it's actually working pretty well so far. I'm actually kind of impressed, I'm not going to lie. So if I zoom out a little bit, these would not normally be these big paper airplanes, but we'll deal with it. They've kind of doing the little zoom thing. Looks pretty good. They're probably on their way home because they're out of everything. Yeah, they're out of everything. These infantry are going to be a lot harder to kill because of the fact. Look at the next posse coming in. It's amazing. They're going to be a lot tougher to kill because of the fact they're infantry. I'll go ahead and close that for now. Speed up time. I'll let them do their thing for 15 minutes. And you can see they're having a real tough time trying to spot and destroy here. They're like angry bees. And they're running out of fuel. Yep. So they probably did a pretty good job of harassing. Notice again, we're having a very difficult time identifying where the targets are. That's where you're going to want some specialized tech for that. Oh, we spotted them, but we can't really do much about it for some reason. All right, pause. It is now about almost 8 o'clock in the morning, and I think just about every one of our battle groups here, yeah, they're all on the way home. Oh, geez, look at that. Yikes. One guy's got a lot of fuel. I wonder why the other guys are empty. Meanwhile, our earlier group from this morning are coming home. By the way, this blue circle tells you the flying range of this aircraft at this time. If that bothers you, you can actually go up here and shut it off with that button. But we'll take a look at that in just a minute. So anyway, he's lining himself up at the back of the carrier. These guys are going to take a long time to rearm and refuel. So if I actually open the carrier up, you can see these guys have all arrived. It's going to take about 3 hours to put ammunition and fuel and, do maintenance and stuff like that. Meanwhile, the Viet Minh are still looking pretty terrifying. We're just having a real tough time finding where they are, and that's going to be an issue. Let's go ahead and take a look at how our reinforcements are going. I believe these guys have they're about an hour to go. So like I said, at about 9 o'clock, we'll be able to really have a fun time of this. So I'm going to go ahead and speed up time here. Just like a bunch of angry insects. I love the time acceleration of this game. Without it, this game would just be painful. So our reconnaissance guys are doing a really solid job of rooting out where those guys are. Now, if these reconnaissance units were actually armed, what would happen is they'd actually attack, run out of ammo, and then go back home and land. So kind of keep that in mind as well. About 9 o'clock, we need to make sure we hold our horses. Stop. Don't let me go past 5 minutes. Stop. Yes. Okay. So now if I go to my message log, which I haven't done a lot of really recently, let's see here. Contact change, weapon endgame. Look at how many shots we fired already. I'm going to scoot all the way back here. I believe my first... Yes. So let's make it exciting. I'm going to go over to the Viet Minh side real quick, and I'm going to order them to fire at anything. Turns out our intelligence wasn't terribly good. The reality was that they intended to attack us at 9. Meanwhile, we're going to get as many aircraft on that station as possible. So to do that, I'm going to go ahead and press F11. We can actually use this close air support mission. By the way, if you delete a mission, anybody still in the air who's linked with that mission won't know what to do. They just sort of go in circles. So I'm going to go ahead and create my mission. I'm going to go call it Wrecker. Actually, it's not terribly specific. Dien Bien Phu close air support. I always like to be specific. It's not unusual to have like 30 of these going at once. By the way, you can do things manually, and I'll show you a little bit of that a little later on. Let's do some ground. Let's press OK. I don't care. That was an issue we had before. All fixed. By the way, if you have a situation where you only want to engage in a certain area, you can actually set up a prosecution area, which is basically the equivalent of the patrol area, except you can only engage in that zone. The patrol area, you can actually shoot out of that zone. So anyway, I'm going to shut off the 1/3 roll. I'm going to go set all these things up. Or do we want... No, that's good. That's good. All right, let's get ourselves some aircraft. Get ourselves some meteors. These guys aren't going to be ready for a while, but we're going to order them in the mission anyway. A-26s. Oh, yeah. This is going to be sweet. I know these guys aren't ready yet, but I'm going to order them up anyway. All right, we're going to send in these other meteors. We're going to grab. Oh, the Bearcats are kind of tired. We're going to launch all these courses. I'd hate to be on that carrier deck right now. It's going to get a little loud. Go ahead and add all those Corsairs. Go grab us every Thunderjet ever. Let's grab all the P-47s. Oh, this is going to be sweet. And of course, let's get the Mystery. Bam. Sweet. So again, we want to decide our standards. We're going to allow them to engage anywhere they actually. We'll go ahead and allow them to attack anywhere. Random within area. We're going to keep them in groups of 4. Groups of 3 work really, really well if you're trying to spread yourselves out a little bit. But I kind of like the group of 4. Let's see here. Tankers refueling. There's obviously no refueling. We don't need it. We can tell them to only take off if they have the correct number of aircraft. I'm not going to do that feature. We can set their station altitude. Yeah, we can have a lot of fun here. Now, let me give you a really, really cool trick. So if you want specific aircraft to take off first, what you do is you go to the airport, you select the aircraft you want to take off first, and hit Launch as Group. So remember, we're doing it in groups of 4, so I'm just going to order these guys off the deck first. Then I really want my Helldivers to go off the deck before all the Corsairs and everybody else goes. Oh, they're not ready yet. Sigh. All right. We're just going to kind of have to let things go. I have a feeling it's going to get a little loud in a second, because what's going to happen is now that attack any target has been authorized by the Viet Minh, it's going to start raining, which it is. Let's hope the close air support gets here soon. So this is going to get messy. Oh my gosh. Let's hope they run out of bombs before I run out of things for them to blow up. Now you'll notice my frame rate just kind of took a dive there. That's because we have so many shells in the air at once. And keep in mind, we're still at 5 times acceleration. So a lot of times you'll read in memoirs or just people's general comments that, a master will study logistics and an amateur studies tactics. One of the problems we're going to have here is the Viet Minh are going to run out of ammunition. And unfortunately for them, they won't be able to do any more damage. And fortunately for us, of course. So kind of keep that in mind. You can actually model logistics in this game pretty effectively. You can actually rearm units on the ground, but that requires setting up munitions dumps and magazines and stuff like that. And it's a bit of a project that I'm not going to undertake just yet. So anyway, let's go scoot back to Hanoi now that Dien Bien Phu is now on the receiving end. Hey, we did a pretty good job of loosening them up a little bit in the morning, but apparently we definitely didn't get everybody. Go ahead and zoom back out here. It looks like we already have some aircraft on the way. So in the real world, I'd be going, get over here, we need emergency air support. So they're doing what they can with what they have, so to speak. Let's go scoot over here. So these Thunderjets are carrying 2,000 pounders. They're going to do a tremendous amount of damage once they get to the target. I don't know why they're flying so low. It must be something to do with their loadout. Meanwhile, I believe this is one of the groups of Corsairs. These guys are going to take a lifetime to get all the way over to Dien Bien Phu. Remember, it's about a 40-minute flight for them. These guys on the flip side, I think their cruise speed's a lot higher. It's 400 knots, so they're going to be joining the fight, and I think it's going to be like 21 minutes or something like that. That's 140 nautical miles. Grab the calculator. 140 divided by 400 times 60. Oh, I was so close. Yeah, I fly. You have to estimate distances and times a lot. So anyway, you can see my frame rate is just dying because there's literally thousands of rounds of artillery shells going off simultaneously right now. So let's go watch the fireworks while those guys are meanwhile lagging like crazy. Again, do what you got to do. Keep in mind, the bigger the scenario, the choppier it's going to get. And yes, I do have a very strong computer. Oh man, I'd hate to be down there right now. Oh, look at those shells. Now the cool thing is if we actually, let me reduce speed here real quick. There we go. If we actually load up tech view real quick, this is going to be bad. It's going to be choppy. Oh, hi there. What are you guys? Oh, the F4s. Nice, they're on their way. We'll go scoot over here to these little poor guys. You can actually see each individual okay, so sometimes you can't see them very well. But you literally could watch these little yellow dots doing one of these things, just kind of raining all over this place. Keep in mind, most of the VC, the Viet Minh can see at this point is mostly airfield stuff. And that's kind of sad because they're going to do a lot of damage to that poor airfield, which is actually exactly what happened, especially on the particular date. Anyway, let's go ahead and speed up time, and we'll set there to be a 5-minute delay. Yeah, it's going to get a little choppy. Like it just comes in like waves of 15 and 26 and 38 and stuff like that. And of course, once they run out of ammunition, the battle will get a little bit quieter. But in the meantime, you can enjoy the fireworks. It's so many shells. Yeah, use games like Steel Panthers and Armor Brigade for these things, please. Slow down time again. I don't even want to know how expensive this fight's being. We could do too is switch out of this particular mode also. Let's see what we're doing. Actually, what I'm going to do, I'll loosen things up a little bit. So we got these guys are on the way. They're not going to be there for another like 14 minutes, I think. We got some meteors. If you hold the control key, by the way, and you click on something, go away, Adobe. Nobody likes you. Let's see here. You can actually see a picture of the particular unit plus what it's doing at that time, which is really, really cool. Let's see what it's doing. There we go. So let's see. It's France. It's engaged defensive, which means they're about to attack. About 275. Nice. And you can also see how much fuel they're carrying and stuff like that. Oh, wow. I did not realize that version of the Meteor actually possessed a radar. That's kind of cool. And, of course, what are they carrying? 20mm cannons. That's not going to go well. Meanwhile, these Corsairs, like I said, by the time they get there, the battle and the war is probably going to have ended already. It's just so much. I'm going to say, let this be a warning to any scenario designer. Probably do a little bit of cheating in a second here, but that's okay. Oh, here comes another launch. Keep in mind, not only do you have the fireworks, but you have all these individual aircraft groups having to be spawned in, loaded, timed, calculated, and everything like that. And this is not what I would consider to be a large scenario. So when you do design your own scenarios or you do go to play scenarios, be wary of things that are at the campaign scale. It's just going to be way too much. I'm actually going to slow down time again. Let's kind of take a look. All right, we're going to cheat a little bit to kind of move things along. I'm going to grab these guys, and I'm going to hut-you. I'm glad they found a shortcut through the mountains. I mean, otherwise this would have taken them forever to get to the target region. I think you guys have got most of the good ideas anyway. I think it's important to kind of see how it sort of plays out in the end here. By the way, aircraft can never collide with each other, so do not worry about that. Let's go grab our poor Corsairs here. Oh my gosh, these Vietmen are going to be going, hide? There we go. Oh, one more. I'm using the M key, by the way. You can only do this if you're in scenario editor mode. Oh, look at those fireworks. Okay, let's see what happens here. So our first close air support aircraft is going to be the Thunderjet, which it still blows my mind that you can carry a 2,000-pound bomb on here. Now, something you want to... Oh, I know who's going to be our first victim. Yeah, they're diving. Keep in mind the cloud cover's at 7,000 feet, which in the real world, this would be terrifying because you're basically flying right past the peaks of these mountains right here. Let's go ahead and zoom in a little bit. It looks like the fire from the Viet Minh has died down a little bit, which is usually indicative of them running out of ammunition. Okay, there they go. So they've dropped some 2,000 pounders. They've only dropped half the 2,000 pounders, and they're just going nuts with those cannons. Oh, this is cool. Ripping along the valley there, and they are doing their deed. Let's see if they do any damage. Keep in mind, these 2,000 pounders are going to put quite a hole. I guess not. Swing and a miss, as they say. Yeah, again, we don't exactly have ballistic computers for these things yet. So we missed. So these guys are kind of scooting around. They've used half their supplies. By the way, if you're interested in changing the number of bombs or something they drop, you can actually go into the mission, and you can go over to the close air support. You can go to the mission doctrine, and you can even do things like control how many bombs they drop. Notice for this particular contact, it's set to drop to all. You can set this to like 1 or something like that. I'm just going to leave it alone because, again, at this time in the universe, they just don't do that much damage. Oh, here comes some rockets. I think those are the Zunis. Yep, 5 inches. They're going to be a little more precise, but keep in mind this is a roughly ambiguous target. Oh, and here comes the rest of it. I wonder if that guy's feeling lucky. Keep in mind the Viet Minh do have AAA. Yep, so they did some damage here. So these bombs, remember, have to travel on an arc that looks like this. Oh wow, look at those fireworks. Oh, that's the end of that unit. So what I really would prefer is if they go ahead and engage this artillery piece right here. You can actually click on a unit, press F1, and then you can kind of manually tell him to attack that particular target. So now the guys with the bombs who haven't left are all going to be arcing around, kind of doing their thing. Meanwhile, they're still firing stuff off. This stuff got evaporated by our close air support, which in the real world, it just wouldn't happen. You take a lot of tops of trees off and make toothpicks out of them, but I don't think necessarily it would have been that successful. So you can see they're engaging them with their air-to-ground guns. Again, you can disable that if you're worried about them getting shot down by AAA. I'd definitely be concerned about it because it happens a lot. All right, they're going in for the dive. Looks like we got some rockets launched over here. And again, had we waited around, you would have been here another 15 minutes, and your time is precious. Now these guys are arcing around like this, and they're doing quite a bit of damage. Quite a bit of damage. I'm very happy with that. Meanwhile, look at the rest of the support. Is this the next group of C-54s? C-47s, I take it back. It is! So remember, these are evacuated casualties, quote unquote. That's kind of neat. It's kind of a neat way to simulate a civilian traffic, too, if you need something along those lines. Let's go ahead and zoom back in here and see how we're doing. Oh boy, this is getting chunky. I have a feeling that this is going to end pretty poorly for the poor Viet Minh there. But again, it's so simplified. So there's a AAA site. Let's hope it doesn't shoot back at you. Again, you're shooting at a pretty ambiguous target there. So you're basically dropping rockets into the jungle is what you're doing. I don't think he's Oh, look at that. Got another one. So who gets the Christmas bonus? The Corsair. Lovely. Meanwhile, I actually just saw several tracers come out of just the air. Is that coming out of the jungle or is that coming out of us? Well, if you press the 9 key on the numpad, you can actually see where everybody is. And you can see it's pretty obvious that it's our guys this time, which is kind of handy. So we've got this crew right here. They're looking pretty good. Let's check something real quick. Alright, spinning around. Speed up time just a teeny tiny bit. Alright, now that the casualties are starting to seriously mount, it's starting to get a little bit smoother. Also, I cleared out the message log. Sometimes that helps. Alright, speed up time one more time. Those meteors are just having a good day. Yeah, I think that's what it was. The message log was getting too long. Keep that in mind with your own games as well. Doing some close air support. Man, this must be look at how many airplanes are coming out of the woods. And then we'll take a look at casualties and we'll call it a video. Done. Pause. Cool. Hopefully you found that video kind of interesting as far as just sort of general mission stuff, general close air support. In another video, we'll take a look at kind of things like naval operations and, kind of how you handle sort of the modern engagement. Let's go ahead and take a look at our losses real quick. So we lost 2 watchtowers. Oh no. Actually, we lost a lot of these. I wonder how many of these were lost to artillery and how much were actually shot down. We also lost a bunch of these. You're not going to be able to replace those. And we also, of course, naturally lost a lot of those reconnaissance planes. Expenditures. Oh, yeah. 1,600 shells. Nice. That's like Saipan in World War II. Screwing down for the Viet Minh here. They lost all of their infantry. They lost all of their guns, all their machine guns, most of their mortars. They lost that. They lost binoculars. Interesting. Tons of infantry sections, tons of RPGs. As far as expenditures goes, they did not do great. All right. Hopefully you found that video kind of interesting. I was kind of like to see these scenarios. Apparently the game gets very, very choppy if you let the message log get too long. To clean out the message log, you can just press Control-M. All right. Enjoy.